All right, let's jump straight into today's explainer. We are looking at a strict, purely clinical pronunciation diagnostic of a recently submitted audio reading. The text is a news report about an incident at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, but honestly, we aren't looking at the news story itself. We're isolating the phonetics. This assessment is completely unflinching. No sugarcoating here. It's an objective, data-driven analysis of mechanical execution, phonetic accuracy, and overall intelligibility. So let's rip off the Band-Aid. The overall pronunciation score for this reading is a 38 out of 100. To set our baseline, a 100 is a flawless Native American English speaker, and a 0 is a CEFR A1 baseline, basically where no words are recognizable. So 38, that's a notably low score. It indicates highly compromised intelligibility. It means that, sure, a super patient listener might piece together the broader context of a sentence, but the actual structural integrity of the words themselves is severely degraded. Now, you might be wondering, why exactly is this score sitting at a 38? Well, this severe drop in clarity is driven by consistent mechanical failures. We're talking major consonant substitutions here, specifically with the w, lul, and sh sounds. Add to that the total dropping of plural markers and the chronic unvoicing of word endings, and you've got a real problem. When these fundamental building blocks fail, it places a massive burden on the listener. Your brain is forced to constantly backtrack and guess what word was just said because the acoustic footprint of the word is basically destroyed. Section 1. Phonetic Breakdown, a clinical analysis of IPA symbol failures. Okay, we've isolated the exact phonemes where the physical mechanics of the mouth are just failing to produce the required English sounds. These are the most severe failures in the recording, starting from the bottom up. The W consonant scores a critical 15. The lateral L scores a 25. And that voiceless postalveolar fricative, the sh sound, scores a 30. When these three specific symbols are compromised, word recognition drops to near 0. What's mechanically fascinating here is exactly why these sounds are failing. Take the W, sitting at that 15. There is a fatal lack of lip rounding. The speaker is hardening the sound, creating a V or even a B sound instead. For the L, 25, the speaker is failing to use the lateral edges of the tongue, and instead, they're striking the roof of the mouth with a tap or flap, kind of like a light D or R. And for that sh at a 30, the distinct sh sound is entirely missing. It's either completely dropped or degraded into a sharp, hissing standard S. Let's move on and look at our secondary tier of phonetic errors. We've got the D consonant at 40, the short relaxed I vowel at 45, and the standard S consonant at 50. Now, these errors are slightly less catastrophic to the absolute structure of a word than the first group, but make no mistake, they create intense grammatical confusion. Let's break down the mechanics again. The D scores a 40 because it's consistently D-voiced at the ends of words. The speaker stops vibrating their vocal cords way too early, which turns a soft D into a sharp T. The IT vowel, scoring a 45, is being improperly tensed. Instead of that short, relaxed sound you hear in hit or bit, it's unnecessarily stretched into a long E sound like heat or beat. And finally, the S gets a 50 because while the speaker actually can produce the sound, they are completely dropping it when it functions as a plural or possessive marker at the end of a word. This literally strips vital grammatical context right out of the sentence. Section 2. Word-level diagnostics. Analysis of highly compromised vocabulary. Having laid out those foundational phonetic failures, we've got to see how these individual symbol failures combine to destroy actual vocabulary in real-time speaking. Let's start with the absolute lowest scoring word in the entire recording out of our top 10, the intended word, Washington. But the uttered audio clearly presents this as either Vassin or, a bit later on, Bashan. This is a perfect, if unfortunate, example of what happens when multiple severe phonetic failures hit in the exact same breath. This word gets a critical score of 10. It is a total structural collapse because the speaker lacks the lip rounding for the W, turning it into a V or B, and simultaneously degrades the sh into an S while also completely dropping the middle and final syllables. The word Washington basically ceases to exist. Without extreme context clues, a native listener would have absolutely no idea what location Bashin refers to. Our next diagnostic focuses on the intended word bulletproof. In the audio recording, this actually came out sounding like burrito-proof. This one earns a score of 15. What we're seeing here are the consequences of our secondary and primary tier failures teaming up. Failing to deploy the lateral L turns the middle of the word into a tapped R sound. Compound that with the short, relaxed I in bullet, being unnecessarily stretched into a long, tense E sound, and bullet becomes burrito. This completely alters the acoustic footprint. It creates a non-existent word that just stops a listener's comprehension dead in its tracks. Moving down our list, let's look at the intended word hid, as in guests hid under tables. The uttered audio distinctly pronounces this as hit. This specific error scores a 35, and it highlights a really specific acoustic danger. Devoicing a terminal consonant, turning that vibrating duh into a voiceless tuh, doesn't just make you sound like you have an accent. It literally swaps one valid English word for a completely different valid English word. The listener hears guests hit under tables instead of hid. Your brain has to hit the brakes, realize that hitting under a table makes zero logical sense in the context of a shooting, and then retroactively correct the grammar in your own head back to hid. That creates a massive cognitive load, and honestly, it's exhausting for an audience. Okay, here we've grouped the remaining lower-tier word errors from our top 10 list. These score between 45 and 50. They're primarily driven by grammatical drops, linkage failures across words, and direct misreads of the text. Let's look closely at the first two: agents, uttered as agent, and correspondence, uttered as correspondent. Clinically speaking, dropping that final S suffix completely strips plurality and possession from the sentence structure. It magically reduces the scope of the incident from multiple Secret Service agents to just one, and totally changes the title of the dinner. English relies heavily on these terminal markers for meaning, and dropping them fractures the syntax. To wrap up the data analysis of these words, we also observed some basic structural distortions. The article A was linked improperly and uttered as and. The conjunction but in but survived got distorted into by survived. And the auxiliary verb has in has faced was read with the totally wrong tense as had faced. These are lapses in basic reading execution that just further drag down that overall intelligibility score. So what does this all mean? Well, it brings us to the final, unavoidable metric of this explainer. The data is crystal clear. The most catastrophic drops in clarity here are entirely mechanical. We aren't talking about abstract issues with flow or vocabulary. We're talking about the physical misplacement of the tongue and lips on the wa and la phonemes. So the question left for the speaker is pretty direct. Will future assessments show a dedicated mechanical correction of these lowest scoring phonemes to restore basic intelligibility? Because until those physical habits change, the acoustic footprint of the spoken English will remain severely fractured.